All right, so I am here again to discuss another movie. I did say that I wanted to get a couple of these out a week, so I thought, why not just sit down and talk about one of the most recent movies that I've watched. And in the last one, I spent way too much time with preamble and just rambling on, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into today's film. Today we have a very, very indie film that is a horror movie called 825 Forest Road. It is a new movie this year, just released on Shudder last week on the 4th of April. It is an hour and 41-minute runtime and is not rated, as a lot of the stuff on Shudder is not. So the thing about this one, and the reason that I really wanted to see this one, I've actually been waiting on this, is because it was written and directed by Stephen Cognetti. Stephen Cognetti, for those who are not big into indie, like very indie movies, especially into found footage horror, is the writer and director creator of the Hell House LLC series of movies. This is a series of movies that started back in 2015. They are all found footage thus far, and there's the original trilogy and then a prequel. All of them are exceptional for found footage movies. And I should preface that by saying I like found footage movies. I watch a lot of them, and most of them, I will full well admit, are not good at all. I don't know why I like the genre, I just do. But Hell House and its sequels are very, very good for found footage. They have a very good narrative and a through story that carries each one individually is good, and then they have a story that encompasses all of them. It's really a world that Cognetti has built that these movies exist in. 825 Forest Road is not part of the Hell House universe, as far as I know. It's not part of the movies or anything like that. A big part of the reason I wanted to check this out is because the final movie in the Hell House series lineage that comes out this fall is going to be a non-found footage film, which is not something I've really seen from Cognetti before. So I wanted to see what he does in a non-found footage capacity with his filming. So this is not a found footage film. And so telling a story from that angle as opposed to something like a found footage is different. It's just different narratively. And I wanted to see kind of how he would tackle this to kind of maybe get an idea of what maybe we can expect in Hell House lineage. As I said, this is a straight up horror film, and Cognetti wrote and directed. It does have Brian Anthony Wilson in it, who has had a lot of bit parts in a lot of different things, especially TV. He was in an episode of Poker Face and an episode of Servant on Apple Plus. And the only other person I recognized their name at all was Elizabeth Vermillier, and she is actually in Hell House, Lake of Fire, which is the second Hell House movie, and I do believe that she is returning in lineage as her same character. So what I like about this one, like with Hell House, Cognetti is really, really good at creating this kind of atmosphere to his films. He has a very good, like, kind of creepiness. It's a slow burn, creepy. There's something going on here, but we don't really know what it is. And this movie is not quite as visual, of course, as, Hell House, all of them. They're very visual movies because they are found footage, and there's a lot of visual storytelling that happens. There is also visual storytelling in this one, but it's different because it's not found footage, and it's more of a regular narrative. However, Cognetti could not make just a regular narrative movie. It's a non-linear narrative, which means that the events as we see them unfold are not necessarily all in chronological order. I know that some people really do not like this kind of storytelling, especially since it is told in like chapters. Every chapter is a different character's perspective of the events that happen. So you're basically watching the same kind of film, the same story from a couple different perspectives. So there's a lot of overlap and things like that. And I know that a lot of people aren't into that kind of storytelling. They just are not fans of that kind of movie. I personally think it can be done really, really well and used very effectively, especially because it allows you to kind of peel off layers of the story as you go. The first one being just a very like bland telling. This is from this perspective, and then each additional point of view kind of reveals more of what's going on in another layer, another depth to the story that we didn't know was there before. So for me, that worked. I thought that it worked well for the way that this story was told. Cinematography in this and even the dialogue are kind of awkward. And at first, I thought this was because it is so different from like a found footage. I don't think that the reason this is not that way is because of a lack of skill on the part of Cognetti. I think what he was going for is this movie, as much as it is a horror movie, is about a couple different things. One of the themes is isolation and kind of the divide between these characters. So the story involves Chuck Wilson and his wife Maria. They, along with Chuck's little sister Isabel, moved to this new place called Ashland Falls to start a new kind of life. However, Chuck and Isabel are kind of estranged, and so Maria doesn't really know Isabel either. And so there's this dynamic of you have these three people living in this house where two of them are married, then one of them is just kind of thrown in there, and they're very unsure of how to navigate each other. And I feel like the reason that there's awkwardness in the acting and in the way things are done is because it's meant to emphasize that through film. It's a part of visual storytelling to make the audience maybe a little uncomfortable and isolated while watching it, if that makes sense. I've seen this technique employed in various movies to varying degrees of success. I think in this one it works, although, like I said, it took me a minute to kind of feel like that was the actual purpose of it, that it wasn't an unintentional thing. Part of that is because of how slow burn this movie is. It is a very, very slowly told. I feel like there's a lot of folklore and mythos that has been put into this, that has been built into this world that has been created, this Ashland Falls. Part of that is probably because there's so much of it in Hell House. I kind of expect it from Cognetti. But also, there are a lot of things that happen in this that I'm not sure all come from the same source. And by that I mean not all of these unsettling things that happen are necessarily the, quote unquote big bad of the movie causing them. At least I don't feel like it is. I feel like there's more to this story. A lot is going on and not all of it is revealed at the end. This is a very kind of emotionally, mentally health focused movie, as a lot of movies nowadays, a lot of horror movies over the last especially couple years have been about grief and about mental health, kind of making parallels between mental health and supernatural hauntings. That is in this as well. This is not one that has jump scares. It's a very slow building kind of sense of dread throughout the movie. So as I said, this is not a found footage movie, but Cognetti did find a way to kind of put some found footage aspects into it. The wife character she does a vlog, and some of the things that we see are through her vlog, as in we are viewing her vlog. So it does have some of that kind of found footage feel to it. And in fact, a lot of the kind of more creepy supernatural aspects come from that kind of limited view that we have of things. Instead of having the omnipresent view, we have a more narrow view of just watching her. So we end up seeing things that she does not see. So it's very much the classic, turn around, there's something going on kind of thing. I think pretty much all of this is all practical effects. There's like no really big budget effects in this. I don't know what it is about Cognetti and his love of like mannequins and using mannequins in various ways to be creepy, but it's effective. He does it in this as well as he did in Hell House. Moving on to the things I did not like as much. The dialogue in this at times can be kind of stiff, and I'm not sure if it's done on purpose or not. I said about the awkwardness between the characters and kind of the whole atmosphere, and that I feel is intentional, but some of the dialogue just doesn't feel like real dialogue. And I know dialogue is one of the hardest things to write. Really being able to nail the way people speak is an art within itself, and not a lot of people can do it really, really well. I do feel like there were some points in this that were kind of, I feel like the way that things that people said could have been maybe done a little bit better, is what I guess I'm saying. There is a choppiness to the editing. Now, part of that is because we are getting the same story told from multiple angles. There's bits left out in every telling. That is understandable to an extent, but it can be a little bit jarring and off-putting at first before we really know that's what's happening. During the first segment, which is Chuck's segment, we have some very jumpy points that could have maybe been handled with a little more finesse to not feel quite so jarring, because it's not until we get to the second version of the events that we really find out, oh, okay, so the reason it's choppy like that is because there's stuff kind of missing that Chuck was not maybe a part of or did not see. So it's meant to keep us from knowing things because the character doesn't know things, but it does create kind of an odd flow to the movie in general, which that kind of non-linear format does tend to do that. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of careful editing and scripting in order for that to not be the case. And because of that, I feel like some of the story is kind of murky. It's kind of muddled. We get where we're going. We get mostly the whole story, but the way that it's unveiled, the way that it's peeled back, and I said there's like, we get new layers every single time we go through this story. By the time we get to the end of it, there's still things that are kind of unclear, kind of ambiguous, and not in a good way. Like, there's a way that you can tell a story and have a lot of ambiguity, and it's still an enjoyable story. You still know what's happened. You might have some questions. Everything isn't spoon-fed to you, but you still understand the things that went on. I feel like this movie does not necessarily do that. I feel like I have a lot of questions about a lot of things, and tying into that, I feel like the ending is really, really rushed. This movie is so slow burn, and the movie goes at this very slow pace, and then when we get to what would be kind of like the final reveals of the movie, they happen so fast. It's a little bit of whiplash, which ties again into the choppiness of it. I feel like even though we kind of knew where it was going, once those events happen, the movie's just like over. It's just done. Post-amble, we get no kind of sum up. We get no resolution, really, so to speak. It feels unfinished. It feels like this story is not over. If there's a sequel coming, I would be very interested in seeing what that sequel will be, especially because there's some narrative turns it takes towards the end that I don't feel have any real impact to the story as told, but could potentially have impact if the story is continued beyond this point. I like what's presented here. I like that there's obviously a lot going on. There's been a lot of thought put into what this place is, this Ashland Falls, what's happened there, what these events are, and what has caused them. I feel like there's a lot of lore there. I just feel like this particular story of Chuck and Maria and Isabel isn't told completely. With Hell House, one of the things that's great is each movie itself is a story. They build upon each other and they're all interconnected, but I feel like you can watch any one of them and not necessarily be lost. So I feel like this movie kind of fails in that respect. I don't feel like this is a full story. I don't feel like this is a finished narrative. I feel like there's more to this story, that there is no real conclusion to it, and that it's meant to continue. If that's the case, I said, like, I'm intrigued enough that I want to see more of this, but also I can understand people being completely turned off to it because, sitting through an hour and 40 minutes of a movie and then having it end in a way that is ultimately kind of unsatisfying because yes, there is an end to the story, but it happens so quickly and it's just very abrupt and kind of off-putting, I think, in that we don't get a lot of explanation. I know the last time I talked about movies, I said about with Holland that I thought that the ending was way too long, that the final act just drags. This one, the final act is too short. there's a happy medium somewhere where we don't have to have 37 endings and we also don't have to end the movie before things are resolved. In fact, there are several kind of loose ends in this that could be dealt with and, fleshed out in future installments, but without the precedent of knowing going into this that there's going to be more after this, it just, like I said, it just kind of feels incomplete. So, what does that mean? I'm going to say for most people, this is not going to be a movie that they're going to enjoy, that they're going to want to watch. I think that, like I said, a lot of people are going to be unsatisfied with the way it ends. And I feel like it's just not going to be one that people respond to. And that's unfortunate because, like I said, I do think there's a lot of good here. There's a lot of good elements here. I just don't think they all came together to make a good, solid, cohesive film in the end. And that's kind of disappointing. It does not, however, make me worried about Hell House lineage. I will say that I do worry about any movies that he writes going forward that are not found footage and are not in the Hell House world. Because I just don't know. Like I said, he's it's very good at building like these folklore, these very intricate kind of backstory kind of things and building upon those stories. It just kind of doesn't work here. There's just too much story for what the movie is, and it ultimately suffers from that. I enjoyed the nonlinear format a lot. As I said, I liked a lot of the elements of it, such as the more human themes that were kind of explored with the mental health issues, the grief issues. Then also, I love practical effects, and there are some really, really nice ones in this. It's hard because I don't want to say that it's necessarily bad. I think it's just not a movie that's going to be for everyone. It feels more almost like a proof of concept rather than a full finished film. I can understand not wanting to watch it because of that. Rest assured, I will definitely talk about Hell House Lineage when it comes out to let you guys know how that goes. But yeah, I guess that's kind of all I have to say about this one. Anyway, I just thought I would highlight a very kind of independent horror film in this one. Expect a lot of indie horror films that you've never ever heard of before in these videos because I watch so much. So that's my thoughts on 825 Forest Road, and I will hopefully be back in a couple days to talk about something new. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you will join me in the next one. Thanks.